Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. Hi, I'm Aisha. For many years, Yayasan Pillar videos stay with the subject of covering the lives of urban poor in all the countries we extended help to. Whether it's in Cambodia, in Pakistan, or in Indonesia, or in Bosnia, or in Malaysia. But the continuing bitter and bloody atrocities perpetrated by Israel on urban poor of Palestine challenge me to somewhat depart from our norm. The poor people of Palestine, before Israel grabbed their lands and before Israel deprived them to plant and harvest on their own lands for their needs, and before Israel stole their homes and destroyed their livelihoods, the people of Palestine were living reasonably well. They had enough to eat, their children went to schools and graduated to become engineers, doctors, teachers, and specialists in their professional fields. They lived in peace and carried on profitable trades with their neighbours. They had viable construction, engineering, and manufacturing businesses. Their scholars and intellectuals articulated and held regular meetings and conferences. Music and cultural events were enjoyed by many Palestinian families. Then came the Israeli invasion. I just can't help asking, why are the Israelis' hearts so blind, so dark, that they could not see that by continuing its oppression and brutal occupation, they became trapped deeper and deeper into the abyss of darkness of Israelis' own making. Yes, their own creation. Doesn't Israel even care about the wrath of over 2 billion Muslims and of the countries which before were their friends and neutral are now driven to take side and turn against them? Is it partly because Israel's strong allies are formidable America and Britain? Well, the tide of world opinion is changing, and it is changing in Palestine's favor.
Journalists and medics, so you can see there are emergency service workers here, there's an ambulance there are journalists. Here we go, look at this, here we go. He just told him not to throw. You can see it. They saw the camera and didn't throw. But there you can see in his hands. Stun grenade.
Iman A asks, what do we do in the West? Are we betraying our brothers and sisters? I'm guessing that the implication is here that because due to virtue of the fact that we're in the West, I'm sharing content and making dua as much as I can. Is this enough?
To answer the question directly, I think it's better to have the Israeli defense minister, the former Israeli defense minister, answer this question. In 2021, when the Israelis were bombarding Gaza, when they went in, when they were saying that this was a terrorist threat, when they were mobilizing their $1 million PR industry to try to really paint the Palestinians as animals and to assert that their bombing of Gaza, their destruction, the slaughter and the like was justified, Benny Gantz hit a problem. And what he did was he summoned the directors of Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram to an emergency meeting. The meeting was held very quickly, within 24 hours, and he commanded, or he asked them, and he pleaded with them to take down #Palestine, to take down Palestinian content. The Israeli defense minister, who oversees all of the mobilization, who has the PR under his command, was asking the social media platforms in which ordinary people, ordinary Muslims were posting, he was telling them, guys, as part of this effort, it is breaking our control of the narrative, breaking our control of the monopoly. We are telling you to take this content down. I believe that Blinken traveled all those hours from Washington to Tel Aviv and the regional powers because the public opinion is not ripe and he's desperate for it to be changed. When Sisi met with Blinken, Sisi, who, whatever your opinions about him, Sisi put the cameras on and lambasted Blinken with a lecture, telling him, you came here and you said you're a Jew. We've never oppressed the Jews in this region, rebuking him in public. It may well have been a political stunt, but it shows you that public opinion is in such a level that the leaders of the region do not want to be seen to be against the Palestinians. They don't want to be seen to be aiding the oppressor. They don't believe that there is any political expediency.
Hear it for the people of the West Bank, for the people of Gaza, for the people of the refugee camps, and say very bluntly to our political leaders in this country, do not condone war crimes.
With the Palestinian ambassador thanking protesters.
Even now, when we feel isolated, abandoned, that so many of you are prepared to come out in support of Palestine, of justice.
Free, free Palestine!
We want justice, you say how?
We want justice, you say how? Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine! Nation is a crime!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
What do we want?
Justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
If we don't get it!
I believe in the liberation of oppressed people all across the world. I believe in the freedom of all colonized people. I believe that Palestinians have been subject to 75 years of a brutal open-air prison system of apartheid. And I oppose injustice anywhere, especially as a black man in America. I understand how the black struggle is connected to the freedom of Palestinian people. So I'm all in favor of the liberation of Palestine.
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Genocide. It's a genocide. They just blowing up civilians.
Well, me as a black American, I experience violence and oppression from a police force that's trained by the Israeli army that's killing Palestinian children.
Palestine is not alone. There are powerful nations that not only recognize Palestine as a state, but also offer support through financial and diplomatic aid. In this episode of FCD Facts, we'll be looking at 10 countries that support Palestine. Starting at number 10, we have the country of Pakistan. Pakistan has been one of the leading nations in voicing their support for Palestine. There have been demonstrations across Pakistan in solidarity with Palestinians. Demonstrators also held up Pakistani and Palestinian flags at many demonstration sites across the country after Prime Minister Imran Khan called for a day of solidarity. Also, Pakistani Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi's remarks on CNN have gone viral, and he's made it clear what Pakistan's stance is when it comes to Palestine and Israel.
What are their connections?
Deep pockets.
What does that mean?
Well, they're very influential people. I mean, they control media.
I mean, I would call that an anti-Semitic remark.
Irish Parliament recently has passed a motion condemning the de facto annexation of Palestinian land by Israeli forces. Now, this makes it the first European Union country to use this specific phrase, de facto annexation, in relation to Israel's actions in occupied Palestinian territories. There was also this video from an Irish Parliament featuring Richard Boyd Barrett discussing the issue with Palestinians. Well, that clip has gone viral, although it was recorded back in the year 2014. But his message has reached far more people now because of the current events.
Most of which has taken place since Oslo. You allow that to happen. Why do you allow it to happen? If you're serious about giving this land to the Palestinians, it's absolutely extraordinary. And it just, you must, are you not just taking us, Ambassador, for idiots? That you can say with a straight face, we're serious about peace, but while we're serious about peace, we're going to seize Palestinian land.
Saudi Arabia condemns you and send aid for Palestinian people. Saudi Arabia permanent member in United Nations, Hamad Subhaibani, said it again. Israel is again and again defying international laws. Israel keeps doing illegal acts of aggression.
Yang kekal dengan dasar kuku besi dan apartheid yang mencengkam penduduk Palestin. Ribuan saudara mara kita di Palestin telah gugur syahid, cedera dan ramai yang meringkuk di dalam penjara tanpa perbicaraan yang adil. Ibu bapa kehilangan anak, isteri diputuskan kasih sayang, suami dan anak-anak kecil hilang tempat bergantung. Sebagai negara yang bertunjang kepada prinsip-prinsip kemanusiaan dan keihsanan, sudah pasti Malaysia tidak menyokong apa juga gerakan atau tindakan yang kesannya akan menyebabkan kehilangan nyawa, khususnya orang awam yang tidak bersalah. Insiden terbaru di Palestin amat dahsyat dan mengakibatkan kehilangan nyawa yang besar di kedua-dua pihak, selain ribuan yang tercedera dan kerosakan harta benda yang teruk. Adakah ini yang dunia hendak atau nanti-nantikan? Sebelum kita menuding jari kenapa pihak Palestin mengambil tindakan nekat Sabtu lalu, selamilah dahulu mengapa tindakan besar ini diambil. Yang dipertua, konflik di Palestin telah berlarutan sejak 75 tahun yang lalu. Selama ini rakyat Palestin telah menjadi mangsa kepada pendudukan haram Israel, penderitaan dan penindasan setiap hari oleh polisi kuku besi rejim Zionis. Tanah air sendiri dirampas tanpa belas ihsan, dan pencerobohan yang berterusan ke atas Masjid Al-Aqsa. Jutaan warga Palestin telah diusir, tidak dapat kembali ke tanah air mereka sendiri dan perlu menumpang di negara-negara lain.
팔레스타인의 연대를
가만둘 수 없지 않습니까? Down, down Israel! Free, free Palestine! Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! 이스라엘의 지상군을 반대한다! Free, free Palestine! From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
And the country we end off with at number 1 is China. China recognized the state of Palestine also back in the year 1988.
冲突成为全世界的热点新闻，可是有人想过吗？对以色列发动袭击的巴勒斯坦的哈马斯组织，其实是当年以色列培养的，是以色列跟 CIA 为了反对当时巴勒斯坦的领袖阿拉法特而专门资助的这个组织。这不是我空口说的白话，我给大家看段视频，你就明白了。
You know, Hamas
was encouraged and really started by Israel because they wanted Hamas to counteract Yasser Arafat. Our CAA thought it was good if we radicalize the Muslim world.
美国全世界培养这样的组织不止这一个，还有包括当年对美国发动911恐怖袭击的基地组织，也就是大家知道的本拉登。这个组织其实也是美国培养出来的，也不是我空口说白话。我再给大家看段视频，这是美国国务卿希拉里当年自己亲口说的。
Let's remember here, the people we are fighting today, we funded 20 years ago.
Amerika uçak gemisini İsrail'e gönderiyor. Amerika'nın uçak gemisinin İsrail'de ne işi var? Ne yapmaya geliyor? Ve buraya gelen uçak gemisinin etrafında bütün botlarıyla, uçak gemisindeki uçaklarıyla ne yapacak? Orada bütün artık Gazze'yi etrafını vurarak, indirerek çok ciddi katliamlara adım atacak.
It's obvious that it was the Israeli regime. No rocket could do such damage and kill so many people. Anyone who knows anything about war knows that that is a lie. And the Israeli president, just a couple of days earlier, said there's no real distinction between civilians and the different resistance groups in Gaza. And that is something that many other Israelis have been repeating for days. What is surprising and what is disturbing, just as much as the fact that the Israelis are so genocidal, that's not surprising. What is disturbing and surprising is that Biden would go on record as blaming the victims. And the Western media, the corporate media, the state media, has been trying very desperately to blame the victim somehow so that the Israeli regime can get away with this crime. So not only are they trying to assist the Israeli regime in this regard, but also they are encouraging the regime to carry out further atrocities. Because now the Israelis know no matter what genocidal act they carry out, the United States, the US president, Western governments, and Western media will try to protect them. If the United States had not supported apartheid in our region, if Israel was dismantled and a state that was tolerant of that tolerated both Muslims, Christians, and Jews together, then West Asia, North Africa, the whole of the Mediterranean, it would have been a region of peace and stability and economic growth in the south of the Mediterranean and the north of the Mediterranean and the east of the Mediterranean would be much greater and more profitable for ordinary people than today. But instead, we have misery across the region. The United States has destroyed the region, much of the region, and it's all because of the Israeli regime. So it serves no purpose for the Americans. It serves nothing but the interests of an apartheid, colonial, despotic, brutal apartheid regime, and I believe that this situation cannot last much longer. I do not believe that the Israeli regime will last. I don't believe that the Americans can continue to prop it up for a very long time as the United States and Europe decline.
We as a Jewish people have made a covenant with God 3,000 years ago on Mount Sinai. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses went up and took the Torah from God, and we made a covenant to uphold the Torah. That is what Judaism is all about, to uphold this covenant, to be close to the Almighty, to be subservient to the Almighty. this movement, the concept of creating a state sovereignty, and what they want to call a Jewish sovereignty, that concept, is a movement that started around 150 years ago. It is a transformation from subservience to God into nationalism. Have a piece of land, to be a nation amongst nations, to be comparable to all the great countries. Now, that in and of itself, even if it would have not affected the Palestinian people, the inhabitants, the indigenous people, in other words, if the land would have been uninhabited, it would still be forbidden for the Jewish people to have this concept of sovereignty, of a nationalism, because we have a long history. We made the covenant with God 3,000 years ago to uphold the Torah, and we were then commanded to go into the Holy Land and build a temple, which King Solomon built a temple. But we were warned by the Almighty and instructed by the Almighty that we have to be on a very high level of spirituality. If not, then we will be driven from the land. And that came around 2,000 years ago. The Romans and the Greeks, they came, they invaded the Holy Land, and the Jews were driven from the land as a nation. Once that happened, we were put under a decree of exile. And so for 2,000 years, we're under a decree of exile by the Almighty, meaning that we are told by the Almighty that it is His will that we should not be this sovereign nation. By Dushinsky, of blessed memory, this is the records of the United Nations. In 1947, a declaration before the United Nations, he said, "We furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine." This is the very religious, representing the religious Jewish community, says, we don't want a Jewish state. And these people are imposters, the one are doing it. And the history is, when he passed on, we took it next, you could see hundreds of thousands of people in the streets of Jerusalem, taking up our next chief rabbi when he passed on. We have hundreds of thousands of Jews living there now under this Eid Harei, this God-fearing community that does not recognize the authority of the state of Israel.
What's going on currently in Palestine is not a religious issue. Rather, it is a geopolitical issue, more specifically to do with settler colonialism, where you have the occupier, Israel, and you have the occupied, the Palestinians. Just like in Ireland, it is not the Protestants versus the Catholics. Rather, it is an issue to do with land. In Kashmir, it's not to do with the Hindus and the Muslims. Rather, it's to do with land. These are political issues, and religion gets weaponized by certain parties for their own gain. Only the weak, the sick, the unwell will weaponize religion for their political gains where it does not have a link. In the midst of Israel's defense minister calling Palestinians human animals, and politicians like Tali Gottlieb calling for a nuclear bomb to be dropped on Gaza, this guy turns up at a synagogue.
But when we say that we stand with Israel, we mean it. Not just today, not just tomorrow, but always.
Now, the Conservatives have been doing very poorly in the polls, and naturally the Conservatives need to reach out to the right-wing voters, and we know what the right-wing guys are doing on social media. They are hell-bent on ignoring anything that Israel does, so this guy is pandering to such individuals just so he can maintain his power, mate. This guy is more messed up than a junkie who scours the pavements looking for used cigarettes. And if you really care about the Jews, here's what the Jews have got to say.
This is not the voice of Orthodox Jews. You should know also that the settlers, the Zionist settlers, does not represent, this is not the mainstream Jewish people. Don't believe the mainstream media.
Jews around the world stand in solidarity with the people of Palestine.
Israel's occupation of the West Bank, the deadly airstrikes it rains on Gaza, and the expulsion of Palestinians from their homes are not just the wrongdoings of one side in an equal conflict. They are rather the ongoing practices of settler colonialism. This is not a dispute, it's an occupation. So why do Western media outlets report on the aggressions of the Israeli government as if they are responses to provocations on the part of the people they occupy? There's a simple answer. It's the ideology of imperialism. But it's increasingly being called out. This was the Palestinian ambassador speaking to Newsnight's Emily Maitlis after 20 Palestinians, including 9 children, were killed in Israeli airstrikes on Monday in Gaza.
The Israelis think that Hamas are a radical terror group and that Palestinian officials use these holy times to incite violence. Was Hamas right to respond with rocket fire?
This isn't about Hamas. Hamas was not involved. There were tens of thousands.
They were when they fired rockets.
Hamas did not decide to evict people from their homes inside the occupied city of Jerusalem. East Jerusalem is occupied not according to my law only, but according to your law, according to the UK position, according to the United Nations. An occupation has to be temporary and it has to respect the rules that govern occupation. Israel has made mockery of these rules, particularly the issue of population transfers, ethnic cleansing, apartheid. I'm sure you have read the Human Rights Report. Those people have researched Israeli policies over the last 2 years. Ask the experts, not Netanyahu. Netanyahu is flaming
of the settlements, but let's just try and understand this. Because Dori Gold, the former Israeli ambassador to the UN, has told us it was pre-planned by Hamas. The march had nothing to do with it. You wanted to make Israel look bad. Do you condemn the rocket attacks by Hamas?
I condemn and I condemn Israeli aggression. I mourn for the 20 people who were murdered in Gaza only tonight. 9 of them are children. I am so sad to see the hundreds of my people
but you know, so I'm not asking about Israeli aggression. I will do that in a moment. I'm asking you about Hamas's aggression tonight.
I am not aware of any Israeli who has been killed. And you ask me a question about violence and condemnation. Who should be condemned, Emily? Who should be condemned? Did you see the images of the 9 children being dissipated in Gaza tonight? Who should be condemned? And then the UK Foreign Secretary is quick to condemn Hamas and never to condemn the Israeli atrocities on a daily basis. We are sick and tired of the double standards, and we have to call it right this time. Call a spade a spade.
Is it the Western governments? Is it? You heard the statement from Dominic Raab today. He condemned the firing of rockets. What is your response to the UK government?
Always the story begins when Palestinian reaction happens, as if it started with Hamas. Look at your question. Your question is about Hamas, rockets.
But that's because I'm talking to you.
No, Emily. I have done many interviews. It starts with the Palestinian reaction, with the symptom of the illness. It never visits the illness. The illness is that this state, Israel, the occupying state, has been applying draconian measures against our people in every sense, depriving them the right to move, the right to own their property, the right to work, the right to vote in a free elections, including in East Jerusalem, every right you can imagine, and not only by the way inside the occupied territories, but even inside Israel itself. There is a Knesset law that has deprived our people inside Israel their basic rights of having self-determination. This whole system has been built. Endemic in it is the racism, endemic in it is the vulgar ultra-nationalism. That's why you get people trying to defend their dignity.
What he said there that really struck with me is this idea. He said, it's always the story begins with the Palestinian reaction, the symptom of the illness. So we say, why are you beginning this conversation with rockets from Gaza when that completely just ignores the context that's happening here, which is this is a place which has been under siege. These are people defending themselves. I want to get up a tweet from Omar Badar, which I think, just really summarized this really, really well. It made a lot of sense to me, made a lot of sense of what we're witnessing right now to me. So he says, 1, status quo, occupation apartheid is violence against Palestinians. 2, then Israel escalates through evictions, beatings, shootings. 3, then some Palestinians respond with violence. And then 4, then Israel responds with massacres. If you start reporting at number 3, you're misleading your audience.
Before 1948, there was no Israel. You had no country. British Prime Minister Churchill and France President made a deal and arbitrarily handed over Palestine, a sovereign country, to you. You came and you conquered. First, you grab small percentage, then 20%, then 40%, then more and more, and now, not only you stole most of Palestine land, you drove the original landowners of Palestine to live in the biggest prison on Palestine land. The American taxpayers are sucked into paying you billions of the dollars to prop up Israel, and the American taxpayers still continue to pay for military wares that you mobilize to commit ethnic cleansing, the killing of thousands of innocent children in Palestine.
If we are interested in not only ending this particular crisis, but of also achieving a durable, truthful, long-lasting solution, we have to go beyond this moment to dismantle the structures of violence that are sustaining it and creating these tragedies that are hurting everybody and will spill beyond Israelis and Palestinians throughout the region and throughout the world.
I want to ask you about the White House just saying that Gaza City's evacuation is a tall order. The Israeli army's call for more than 1 million people to evacuate North Gaza, a tall order, the White House has said, adding the U.S. understands Israel is trying to give civilians fair warning. Your response, Nora Erekat?
That is so cynical. That is so cynical and can only be corroborated by an irresponsible media that has failed to show decimation of Palestinian communities, the attack on shelters, the attack on refugee camps. What warnings? To what end? Palestinians have been under siege for 16 years. There are no humanitarian corridors. The one corridor with Egypt was bombed by Israel. The Minister of Israeli Defense literally said that there will be no exit, that there will be a siege, that electricity will be cut off, that water will be cut off, that Palestinians are human animals. There has been a priming that all of these mass atrocities will be accepted by a population who will watch it with lament, but think to themselves, but what else was Israel supposed to do? We are all being primed to accept mass atrocities. This, historically, is the playbook of how genocides happen.
You, Israel, and your buddies America and Britain call Hamas terrorists, when all Hamas wanted is to defend themselves, defend their families against Israel's brutality and oppression, and against Israelis' greed to grab more and more on Palestinian lands. Muslims and Christians and friends of Palestinians recognize Hamas as courageous resistance and freedom fighters against apartheid and cruel Israeli regime for decades. That is Hamas on the one hand. On the other hand are the Israelis who, since they landed on the land of the Palestinian people, have been stealing their lands, evicting them from their homes, depriving Palestinians of their livelihoods. And if the people of Palestine dare to refuse the Israelis' illegal demand, the Israelis would turn violent on them, kidnap their family members, brutalize them, and kill them. Now, who do you think fits the terrorist description best, Israelis or Hamas?
In only 7 days, Israeli occupation forces has bombed, killed, brutally buried 2,750 Palestinian civilians. More than 700 out of those were babies, children, and infants. Israel is paying billions of dollars to global news, brands, and celebrities to hide, distort, and fake the news, saying that Hamas has been doing that to Israeli children with no proof.